There are those type of deaths where you know it's going to happen. For example, if somebody's getting sick, if somebody's getting older, and you know that eventually, soon enough, they are going to pass away. So in some way, your body has the chance to say goodbye. However, what can also happen, and this is what happened in my case, is that those deaths are completely sudden. And now you're standing there completely confused because you never got a chance to say goodbye to that person. And now your entire body is craving not only to have them back, but also just to be able to have that closure, that one last thing that you wanted to say to them, that one last time that you were holding their hand or hugging them, or just having that chance of saying goodbye in whichever way that was. But in some cases, unfortunately, we just can't do that. This often leads to complicated grief. I will be doing a neuroscience series on grieving soon, where I'll be talking a lot more about this, but generally speaking, as you can hear by the sound of it, complicated grief just means that the grieving process takes a lot more work and effort to go through. And in this case, because the death was so sudden and so unexpected that you basically had no way to prepare yourself for it, and now all of a sudden this is just thrown into your life and you're like, okay, what is happening? That is why it can often be a lot more complicated to go through this process than it would be if you may have been prepared for months or even years. Generally in life, we need those goodbyes just to be able to have closure. You may have had a friendship or a relationship that just ended very strangely, and you always just have it in the back of your mind because you never had that proper closure. Even if we just leave somebody's house, it is normal for us as human beings to say goodbye to them, because that means, okay, we're saying goodbye now, and maybe tomorrow we can say hello again. However, now we have the problem that not only have we not said goodbye, we also know that there's never going to be, I already started this before I even started filming. I don't know what is happening. But I think because the 1 year anniversary of my mom is coming up, these videos are getting incredibly hard to film. But we're going to push through because I want to be able to share this with you guys. And it's a little bit like a band-aid if you think about it. So you have this open wound, and what are you gonna do? You're gonna put a band-aid on it, right? So it has closure. And if you now think about how it feels to have somebody taken away from you without having the ability to say goodbye, and if you're watching this, you unfortunately may have gone through this already, it's like there's no band-aid on it. So everything that happens to the wound is going to hurt so much more because you're pretty much walking around with this open wound that is really impossible to be closed the way it was supposed to be closed. And now we kind of have to fix it ourselves. Imagine a world where there was no band-aids at all, and now you're walking around with this huge open wound and you're just like trying to find ways to close it, which is really, really tough. I can honestly tell you from my own experience, and I'm still working on it to this day. And sometimes I do wonder, does it really help to know months before, or would it just make the period before a lot harder? I think there's really no this is better or this is worse. But what I do know is that I wish there was things that I could have told my mom before, and I wish there were so many things that I would have loved to tell her, but in the end, I mean, would have changed anything? We don't know. But what we have to remember, and this is incredibly important, is that when we go through this type of grieving, this complicated grieving, through a sudden death, or God forbid, even a murder or something, then it will take longer. You are going to take a lot more time for this healing process because it is so incredibly hard for your body and your mind to understand. It's not just, oh, it's difficult. Your whole system is actually completely confused. Your brain is completely confused because if our brain can't file something properly, it just does not know what is going on anymore. And as we all know, we all want to make sense of the world all the time, right? We want to know what is happening. We want to know what this is. We want to categorize things. We are experts in giving everything names, in categorizing things. So usually when there's something we don't understand, you know how frustrating it is. Now imagine that with a human life. It is so incredibly frustrating and confusing at the same time. So when my mom died, not only did I not know that it was going to happen, but also I was in another country. So I never actually saw her body or anything of those beginning stages, the finding the body, then dealing with the body, then you obviously have to get the body ready to be, in that case, shipped away because she was living on a small island. But with none of this process, me or any of my brothers were connected to in any way. So it's almost like my body, maybe in some part, believes that somewhere she's like, gosh, what's happening today? Yeah, you kind of believe that maybe she's still there, because I never actually saw that she really is dead. And I wonder if it's better or worse to not see the body or to see the body. I think that may be different for every single one of us. In some way, I am really glad that I didn't see it. Maybe it would have helped me with the closure process. But here's a really fascinating example from nature from this. And that also just proves how important it is to have this time where we can say goodbye. When a chimpanzee loses their child, it is incredibly fascinating what happens. So the mom of the chimpanzee will often carry the child around for days. The dead body of the child she will not let go of, despite knowing that it is dead, because she doesn't try to feed it anymore, she doesn't try to interact with it. However, she's just holding it close by and basically cuddling it for the whole time until eventually she lets it go. And that is most likely her way of finding closure and being able to let go. If you think about how close monkeys are to us, they are, I think, our closest relatives in the animal world. And the fact that they have such an incredibly intense way of letting go of their child shows how important this need for closure is. And this is also why rituals such as funerals are so incredibly important for us. And this doesn't have to be your classic church funeral. There are so many different ways that you can say goodbye to a person. And I realized as well, for me, for example, my mom had 2 funerals, and the first one I absolutely loved because her friends were speaking and it was just really, it was such a loving environment. The second one in the church, however, I just didn't really resonate with it, but there may have been other people, for them it was the complete other way around. So I think it's really important to remember that somebody might say, oh, just wait for the funeral and then you'll have your closure and everything will be fine. Well, no, because just because for one person the funeral is that closing process, that doesn't mean that it has to be the same way for you. That's why it is so important that you find your way of finding that closure for your person, because if you say, okay, well, everybody says with the funeral, it's going to be the final cut, and then I have to be fine afterwards. Well, that's not the case. And you may have to try different things out, where you may be sitting out in nature with a candle, or you may be doing something that you guys always did together. There are many different ways that you can try out. And what I think as well, you could look at all the different types of funerals in the world and then see, okay, maybe there's one that really screams out to me that I could celebrate in a smaller circle, or maybe even just with yourself. And I also think that despite how many rituals we may do, and despite how many funerals we may have for them, that still does not mean that now you are just going to be over it. The pain that you have when grieving somebody, and maybe in your case when you lost that person all of a sudden, it is going to take such a long time. It has nearly been a year for me, and yes, there's so many things that get easier, but believe me, I am by no means anywhere close to closing this process, and I don't think that's ever going to be possible. I think that is completely unrealistic to say, well, you're just going to let go and then you're fine and everything is good and you're never going to think about that person again. That's not how it works, because you're always going to think about them, and you're always going to maybe have times where it's tougher and times where you cry more and times where it's more difficult. And that is totally okay. As long as we know that we have to be kind to ourselves during these times, that is what matters most. Show yourself so much love. Make sure you are with people that just light you up and make you so incredibly happy inside. And make sure that you enjoy every second of that life that we do have still here. And if you want to learn more about how to go through this grieving process and what are some techniques that I have been using, especially in the beginning of my grieving process, then check out this video right here, because I know that it is massively going to help you with that.